have probably heard the phrase that everyone is a little bit autistic many times. It is a common saying used to try and make people feel included, but it is actually quite misleading. Being on the autism spectrum is not about having a few personality quirks or being a little bit shy at a party. It is a fundamental difference in how the brain processes every single piece of information it receives from the world. Today, we are going to look at 13 specific reasons why you might not be autistic. I am an educator, not a doctor or a psychiatrist, so please remember that this video is meant for self-reflection and guidance. If you feel like these points do not describe your life at all, it is always a good idea to seek a professional opinion from a healthcare professional. We are going to build a roadmap to help you understand your own mind better and separate the myths from the reality of neurodiversity. Think about the last time you had to work on a group project at your job or in school. For most people, fitting into a team is a process that happens almost automatically. You walk into the room, you see who is taking the lead, and you find a way to contribute your own ideas. You might disagree with someone, but you can usually find a middle ground without feeling like your world is falling apart. This is because neurotypical people have a high level of social flexibility. If the plan changes at the last minute because a manager or a teacher had a new idea, you might be annoyed, but you can adapt. For an autistic person, this is often very different. They might struggle with what we call rigid thinking. When a plan changes, it doesn't just feel like a minor inconvenience. It can feel like the ground is moving under their feet. If you find that you can collaborate with others easily and the flow of group work feels natural to you, that is a strong sign that your brain is wired in a standard way. You don't feel that sharp internal friction when things don't go exactly as you expected. Another area to look at is how you handle conversations when there are a lot of people involved. Imagine you are at a busy cafe with 3 or 4 friends. The conversation is moving fast, people are laughing, and the topic jumps from a movie someone saw to a plan for the weekend. If you can follow this flow without feeling like you are drowning in information, you are using a very specific set of social skills. You are filtering out the noise of the coffee machine and the other tables while also catching the subtle hints in your friends' voices. You know when it is your turn to speak without having to count the seconds of silence. Autistic people often find these situations incredibly draining. They might have a longer processing time, meaning they are still thinking about the first joke while the group is already on the third one. They might also find small talk or topics they aren't interested in to be physically boring or even painful to endure. If you can sit in a group chat and feel like you are part of the rhythm, it means your brain is handling that complex data effortlessly. Eye contact is also a major factor. For you, looking someone in the eye might just feel like a normal part of being polite. You probably don't even think about where your eyes are landing during a conversation. But for many people on the spectrum, eye contact is an intense and even painful experience. They often describe it as feeling too close or invasive, as if the person they are talking to is looking straight into their most private thoughts. It can cause a heavy feeling in the head or make it hard to breathe properly. Some people have to look away just so they can focus on the words being said. If you can look a colleague or a teacher in the eye and feel comfortable, or even feel like it helps you connect with them, that is a very common neurotypical trait. You aren't experiencing the sensory overload that comes with that direct visual connection. Finally, let's consider how you deal with things that feel unfair. We all experience moments where a rule is broken or someone is treated poorly. A neurotypical person usually has the ability to let it go if they see that complaining will cause more trouble than it is worth. They might think it is wrong, but they can move on and have a normal evening. They prioritize keeping the peace and maintaining their social standing. Autistic people often struggle with this kind of social compromise. They might feel a deep, burning need to correct a mistake or point out an injustice, even if it means getting in trouble with a boss or a friend. They might spend days or even weeks thinking about that one unfair moment. If you can walk away from a minor conflict and not let it ruin your entire week, you have a level of cognitive control that is very typical. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This ability to put things behind you and keep moving forward is a key part of how most people navigate the world without getting stuck in the past. Now let's look at what is happening inside your mind, in your own head, when you are alone. Think about your thoughts. Most people have moments where a song gets stuck in their head or they worry about a bill, but they can usually shift their focus if they try. They have a certain level of control over the volume of their own internal monologue. If you can decide to stop thinking about a frustrating conversation and instead focus on a book or a movie, that is a sign of a typical brain. For many autistic people, thoughts are not always under their control. They experience rumination, where a memory or a worry plays over and over like scratched records. If you can change the channel in your mind whenever you want, you are avoiding a struggle that many on the spectrum face daily. Moving on to how you speak and how others hear you. Think about how often people misunderstand your intentions. Do you find that you rarely get into trouble for saying the wrong thing? In a typical social world, there are thousands of unwritten rules. You know when to be quiet, when to use a soft tone, and when it is okay to be blunt to the person next to you. If you navigate these rules without studying them excessively, you are likely neurotypical. For an autistic person, communication can feel like walking through a minefield. They might say something perfectly honest, thinking they are being helpful, only to find that everyone around them is suddenly angry or offended. They often miss the hidden meanings in a person's tone of voice or the way someone shifts their body. If you don't constantly apologize for being too direct, you are likely tuned into the social frequency. Then there is the issue of interruptions. Imagine you are focused on a task. Maybe you are writing an email or cooking a meal. Suddenly, your phone rings, or someone comes into the room and asks you a simple question. How do you react? Most people can pause what they are doing, answer the question, and go right back to work. It might be a little annoying, but it doesn't break their brain. Inertia occurs when a brain moving at full speed must stop. This causes a physical shock, like an electric jolt. This also applies to sudden noises. If a plate drops in a restaurant or someone laughs loudly behind you and you can just ignore it, you have a strong sensory filter. For others, that loud noise is like a heavy physical blow that shatters their thoughts for several minutes. Another point is how you handle changes in your physical space. If you come home and find that your partner has moved the furniture around or even just rearranged the items in the kitchen, how do you feel? You might notice the change, but it doesn't make you feel lost. And maintaining a sense of peace remains easy. For autistics, the environment is part of an internal map. When things are moved without warning, it can cause genuine mental confusion. It feels like the rules of the world have changed without their permission. If you are flexible with your surroundings and don't feel a sense of dread when things are out of place, that is a clear indicator of a neurotypical brain. Finally, consider your ability to handle a long list of errands. Think about a trip to a big grocery store. You have to find 10 different items, avoid other people's carts, handle the bright lights, and talk to the cashier. For most, this is just a chore. You might be tired afterward, but you aren't crushed. You still have energy to cook dinner or talk to your family. This is because your brain is efficient at managing multi-step tasks without overloading. Autistic people often find these routine activities incredibly draining. Every single step, from the noise to the choices and the social interaction, sucks away a massive amount of energy. If you finish errands and feel like yourself, you have typical stamina, which is vital for daily life. Think about your energy levels throughout the week. For most people, tiredness is just a physical feeling that happens at the end of a long day. You go to work, you interact with your social peers, and you eventually come home. You might be ready for bed, but you still feel like yourself. This is because your energy levels are sustainable. You do not have to spend every second of your day pretending to be someone else just to get through a conversation. For an autistic person, being in public often requires something called masking. This is a very high-cost activity where they have to manually control their facial expressions and monitor every word they say to fit in. If you do not feel like you are performing a complex role just to exist in a grocery store, you are saving a massive amount of brain power. When you get home, you might want to relax, but you do not need to sit in total silence for 5 hours just to feel human again. You have a social battery that recharges with a normal night of sleep, rather than one that stays empty for days on end. Let us also talk about your health in a broader sense. There is a strong statistical link between autism and other medical conditions. In fact, 94% of people on the spectrum deal with at least one coexisting issue. These are often things like chronic anxiety that never seems to go away, or sleep disorders that make it impossible to stay on a regular schedule. Many people also face gastrointestinal problems, ADHD, OCD, or dyslexia. These are not just random symptoms. They are often part of how their nervous system is wired. If you find that your body generally functions well, that your digestion is stable, and that you do not struggle with these common comorbidities, it is another sign of a neurotypical profile. Your brain and body are likely working in a synchronized way that does not cause constant internal friction or physical discomfort. Reason 12 involves your sensory sensitivity. Most of the world is built for people who have a natural filter in their brains. This filter allows you to ignore the hum of the air conditioner, the smell of the trash can in the corner, or the feeling of your socks against your skin. For you, these things are just background noise that you barely notice. You can focus on a conversation in a busy coffee shop without every other sound crashing into your ears at the same volume. However, for those on the spectrum, this filter is often missing or very weak. A small noise can feel like a physical blow, and certain textures can be literally painful to touch. If you can walk through a mall with bright lights and loud music and only feel a little tired afterward, your sensory system is working in a typical way. You are not being bombarded by every single piece of data in your environment at once. The final reason is the absence of meltdowns or shutdowns. It is very common to have a bad day where you feel overwhelmed or angry. You might snap at a friend or want to go home and cry, but a meltdown is not a temper tantrum or a simple bad mood. It is a total neurological failure. It happens when the brain receives more information than it can possibly handle, and the system just crashes. During a meltdown, a person might lose control of their emotions or actions entirely because their brain is in a state of emergency. During a shutdown, they might go completely quiet and become unable to move or speak for a long time as their mind tries to protect itself. If you have never experienced this kind of total brain exhaustion where you literally cannot function, you are likely neurotypical. Your brain has the capacity to handle stress without completely breaking down. To wrap this up, we have looked at 13 clear signs that you might not be on the spectrum. From your ability to handle eye contact and group chats to your sensory filters and energy levels, these traits define a neurotypical experience. If you found yourself nodding along to these descriptions, it is likely that your brain works in the way most of society expects it to. Remember, the goal of this discussion is not to dismiss your feelings, but to provide clarity and debunk the myth that everyone is a little bit autistic. As I said before, I am an educator, not a doctor or a psychiatrist, and this is not a medical diagnosis. If you feel that these descriptions do not fit you and that you actually struggle with many of these points, please reach out to healthcare professionals. They are the only ones who can provide the formal testing and support you might need. Understanding who you are is the first step toward a better life. Whether you are neurotypical or autistic, knowing how your mind works helps you navigate the world with more confidence. Thank you for walking through these 13 reasons with me on this journey of self-discovery.